Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we're talking about another one of these new banger cards. It's a new spell card called Triple Tactic Tasking. This card is coming out in Photon Hypernova, and as far as single generic cards go, this is definitely the chase card for the set. This card's crazy. It kind of falls in line with Triple Tactic's talents. We know how good that card has been in its tenure in Yu-Gi-Oh! Over the last, whatever it is, 1 or 2 years. So yeah, let's read over this card, and then we're going to go through all of the best targets, in my opinion. I categorize them based on how I view them, and then we'll look at it from there. So, Triple Tactic Tasking. This card reads, if your opponent has activated a monster effect this turn. Just kind of like Triple Tactic's talents, right? Becoming live by your opponent activating something. Set one normal spell or trap directly from your deck, except for another copy of itself. It cannot be activated this turn. Or, if your opponent controls a monster, you can add that card to your hand instead. So, basically the whole basis here is that if your opponent activates a monster effect and now they control a monster, this card can add any spell from deck to hand, and it will be activatable, obviously. So that's really good. Obviously, searching any normal spell in the game is really, really crazy. And obviously you could set a trap no matter what. Obviously it's going to be set, so it's going to be dead for the rest of that turn, but by the next turn it's going to be live. Mainly, a lot of the scenarios for this card seem to be a little bit better going first, but it is definitely not a bad card going second, so much as you play at least a one of some type of really good target off this card that helps you break apart a board, threaten a board from there, which we'll be looking at. So this card is crazy. This card is insane. It searches like almost all the cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because a lot of the normal spells and traps that you can search off of this can also search monsters, can also search, other different cards. So many cards are accessible because of this. So let's get into it. The first category for sure, to me, that's crazy, is engine pieces. The fact that you can just search like a spell that like starts your engine is crazy. Sorry, just trying to bounce it out there. So yeah, let's start with some of the most generic ones that are like kind of like generic engine pieces. Obviously, there are more just straight up applications in decks in the game, but these are more splashable engines that you could see in a multitude of decks. So I'll run through them. Branded Fusion, Chaos Space, stuff like Dragon Link, Cynet Mining, any Cyberse deck. There's a couple of targets like this. Fossil Dick, same thing. Any dinosaur-based deck. I know I really only have one right now. Well, I guess you have Dinomorphia, so that could just get you Theresia, which is cool. As well as we're getting a new dinosaur archetype in the next deck build pack, so very cool. Nadir Servant, obviously insane, very powerful card. Rite of Aramesir getting you into the adventure engine, really good. Red Eyes Fusion, I think about a deck like Subterror, for example. If you went like City Search Guru, Set Guru, City Flip Guru, and when he activates his effect, let's say he gets Ashed and or Veilered by your opponent. There's your monster effect. Now Tasking can just set Red Eyes Fusion straight from the deck, and now you can fire Red Eyes Fusion immediately and just at least still get to a Dragoon, and you're going to win a lot of duels that way. So yeah, really strong. Not a lot of decks are going to be able to play this, but like a few that can, this card could be crazy. Rhoda, same thing for the other two, but this one of, like, that's another huge thing for this card is that there's a lot of one on the ban list, like spells in particular, that this card allows you to get with a little bit more consistency, which is very big. So Rhoda, getting any warrior low level. Foolish Burial at 1, just accessing anything, getting it from deck to grave, very nice. Gold Sark, a little more particular in the kind of decks this works in, but sure, could come up. Instant Fusion. This one's particularly a crazy one in tier. If Kit Kalos gets banned, this one's not nearly as insane because it's more of like a generic card. There's not a ton of engines that just like go crazy with Instant Fusion. Tier, because of Kit Kalos, is one of the first ones, but still very accessible. 1 for 1 is insane. This new spell literally says like summon a level 1 from deck. Yeah. Terraforming. You could just get any field spell in the game because Terraforming's at least at 1 and Tasking gets you to it. So any deck that has a field spell that's like a 1-card starter, boom, it's just 3 more copies of Terraforming, potentially. And then as far as engine stuff goes, I just wanted to note, I know these aren't generic, there are a couple of trap-based decks that even if you're not getting a spell to activate right there on that turn, there's a couple of couple of decks that don't have a spell starter, but they do have a monster, or not a monster, a trap starter. So stuff like Welcome Labyrinth, or one of the Dinomorphia traps, or even Elixir of Scarlet Sanguine. There's a couple of trap decks where this card could still come up theoretically. The only problem is you're probably not doing a ton turn 1 to bait monster hand traps, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. But maybe going second, there's like some use for it. Moving on. Board breakers. This is one of the biggest categories here because I think this one's really important, because I think if you're going to play Tactics Tasking in your main deck, you're probably going to want to at least tech in 1 to 2 copies of these types of cards, so that way maybe it's a matchup that you are not great against, but you don't want to play 3 copies of, name any, board breaker that's at 3. You don't want to have to play 3 copies of that in your main because it, will lead to bricking. And so this gives you more accessibility to those when you need it, without having to allocate 3 whole main deck slots to these types of cards. So Change of Heart, obviously a really powerful one of. Raigeki, actually been seeing some play in the OCG, funny enough. Dark Ruler No More, very good as well. This one I've been seeing in the OCG a fair amount of people just playing 1 copy of Dark Ruler, because, if they bait a hand trap with something early, or bait any monster activation early in the turn, then they can Tasking for Dark Ruler, and that's just going to turn off the rest of the board, and you get to play from there. Very good. Harpy's Feather Duster for back row matchups. Wouldn't be surprised to see this at a high rate. Interrupted Kaiju Summon, just another form of Raigeki, but with some upside. Lightning Storm, same thing, just a little bit worse to draw later on, or access later on. So this one probably wouldn't see as much play, I would guess, because of that restriction. Triple Tactics Talents, I really think a lot of people, even if they haven't been playing it to this point, would play one of this in a lot of different decks, just because not only is it like a board breaker, but it has multiple different effects. Now tasking can be not a Raigeki, a Pot of Greed, Change of Heart, or it can be like a confiscation hand rip. So the whole basis for this is, if tasking is live, by default, talents is live. So why not play this? Why would you play Change of Heart instead of a card like this? Because this can just also be Change of Heart, and if you're getting it off tasking, it would already be live. So you don't even have to worry about the restriction of talents needing a monster effect activated first. So I think this one makes a ton of sense. This one will see a lot of play most likely. Ultimate Slayer is another one, very format dependent, but if you're only playing it as a one-of, could be really nice. And then Evenly Matched is like the one trap card that I think fits this mold here, just because it will be live immediately, assuming you have no cards on the field. You could just go straight to battle, end of battle, wipe the, evenly match things away. So this card has also been seeing a little bit of play in the OCG. Now we get to the next section, which is kind of I called it extenders, but it's just interesting stuff. There's also stuff like Pot of Desires, which is technically a +1, so technically you could just say, you know what, I'll just turn this into a +1. I just didn't feel like that's powerful enough. I don't see a ton of scenarios where people would actually go for Desires and a random draw 2, but I think people might go for a random draw 3 if they play it in the right deck. So I put Demise on here just because, just drawing 3 is so crazy. I know it's a very particular scenario, because this card Demise requires you to be able to kind of empty your hand, but if you can and resolve this, I could actually see people going for this. And it's, again, another broken spell at 1 on the ban list that now becomes a lot more accessible. Monster Reborn, another crazy extender. I could easily see this seeing play in combo decks that want to play more cards like Tasking, because it's more versatile. It can be good post hand traps going first, or it can also help you break boards going second, right? By playing a card like Monster Reborn, that could allow you to play through certain interruptions and continue on from there. So really good. Phantom Shade Brigand is the last one I threw on here. Again, really interesting card. This one's only going to come up in very particular decks that maybe need a level 4 or need a warrior. This kind of gives you access to just getting a warrior and summoning it immediately, assuming there's no traps in your grave. So that's a pretty cool application for the right deck. And the last thing is going first stun cards. So a pointer. This is the only trap I think I put on this entire list that's at 1 and makes a ton of sense. But yeah, pointer's now at 1. If you want, you could just grab this card and go ahead and rip a card out of the opponent's hand. Now, there's definitely logic that why wouldn't you just grab Tactics? But the argument there is, if your opponent hand trapped you without putting a monster on the field, you wouldn't be able to make tactics live. You would be able to set it, but you wouldn't be able to activate that turn. Whereas you could just get a pointer, and that would be activatable on the opponent's turn to go ahead and do that hand rip. So really powerful, mainly side deck, post side going first stuff. Really cool applications here. Sanctum, same thing. You have to play the extra brick with the Scythe, but cool, makes it a lot more accessible. Different Dimension Ground, another crazy one versus graveyard decks. Dimensional Barrier, don't have to explain these. And Eradicator, Epidemic Virus. Just all insane blowout cards that ideally in most decks you would never really want to play going, or at least in the main deck for like drawing them going second game ones and stuff like that. But really powerful cards that you could side for when you're going first, and potentially just even side one copy. Don't even worry about like hyper turboing it out. It's there if you open up a cool hand, but your deck's probably already geared to go first anyway. Pretty cool with like very minimal, allocated slots to your main or your side, which is really cool. So I think that's the biggest basis. Obviously, there's a ton of versatility here. I think the biggest highlights for me that I saw overall here, as far as like very particular instances, Triple Tactics Talents, mentioned that. I think Evenly Matched is another one. I think obviously the engine cards, but those just really depend on like what specific deck you're playing. Like I threw out stuff like Branded Fusion. I know that card could be like that engine could be played in multiple decks, but how many decks really? So I don't want to say that one, but I would also throw out Terraforming. I think would be the other huge one, because there's just so many decks that play good field spells. So I think having a one-off Terraforming, this kind of makes Terraforming and field spells in general way more accessible. So kind of with this card, I kind of really hope Konami doesn't decide to just like put the tier field spell to 1, because it's just going to get really accessible anyway. So kind of hoping that's not the direction they go. But still really cool, really crazy card. It is by far the chase card of the upcoming set. You definitely should be looking to get your hands on some. If you are a competitive player, I would at least recommend. But yeah, that's it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, let me know if there's any particular instances that you can think of, whether it's a deck you play or just something that popped into your brain that I didn't mention here. I tried to stay more generic, more just, stuff that will come up more often rather than like very specific instances here. So let me know if there's any particular ones that you think are really cool or anything generic that I might have missed. There's a ton of cards out there, so I did my best, but I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. You want to see more videos like this one down the line. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.